This is a video on naming covalent compounds. So a covalent compound is basically two non-metal atoms joined together. And they're in abundance, there's so many out there. CO2, for example, that's all we exhale in every breath we take out, every exhale. Now, this is how chemists express compounds, chemical compounds, in terms of symbols and numbers. For the everyday average Joe, that's probably not understandable. So it's important to know how to go from here to an actual name, because looking at the back of your products, like cleaning products, bleach, for example, used for cleaning, there's the actual name of the compound instead of numbers and symbols. And that tells you what it's actually made of in terms of elements. You can go both ways. So the rules for naming covalent compounds aren't really that difficult. Before I get into the rules, it's important to know what are known as prefixes. So prefix is something which goes before a word or a letter or something else. And for Year 9 Science, it's important to know these 9 prefixes. And I'll show you now. So taking the example of CO2, for example, when writing out the name of this element, so carbon dioxide, I should say the covalent compound, because it's made of carbon, which is a non-metal, and oxygen, another non-metal, carbon dioxide. The di is the prefix in this case. So whenever you have one atom, the prefix is mono. Okay, think of monobrow. Mono means one. Prefix of 2 atoms, which in this case, the oxygen has 2 atoms. The prefix is di. Okay, think of dice. Right. There's 2 of them. 3 atoms, tri. Okay, think of triangle, there's 3 sides to a triangle. 4 atoms, tetra. Okay, think of a rectangle, it's got 4 sides. 5 is penta. Think of a pentagon. Pentagon has 5 sides. 6 is hexa. Think of a hexagon, it's got 6 sides. 7, octagon, right, octagon, it's got 8 sides. It's getting more difficult to draw, but I think you probably get the idea. 8, my bad, sorry, hepta for 7. So 7 sides, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I can draw it. 8 is octa, so octagon. 9 is nona. Okay, I'm not going to draw it, but it's got 9 sides. And 10 is deca. It's got 10 sides. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of these you already know. Okay, you know what mono means, di, tri, things like penta, hexa, hepta, okay, based on shapes. So when naming covalent compounds, you need to know these prefixes by heart, right? For an exam, let's say. So that's the first bit. Let's get into the second bit now. Let's do some examples. So I'll go back to the CO2 example, right? Let's say I'm a chemist. I want to tell someone, an everyday average Joe, what this means in terms of words. The first step is to write down the first non-metal element which appears, and that's C. And all you have to do is really use your periodic table. You don't have to memorize this. It's carbon. That's your first step. Step number 2, it's not relevant to this step, but anyway, you write down the prefix that goes with the number of atoms here. So in this case, carbon only has 1 atom. By convention, we don't write the prefix, okay, for 1. So you keep the carbon as it is, step 2. Step 3, write down the name of the second non-metal element, which is oxygen, O for oxygen. So carbon, then oxygen. Step 4, write down the prefix that goes before the word oxygen. So in this case, got 2. The prefix, if you look here, is di. So it becomes carbon dioxygen. And then the last step, step 5, you replace the YGEN with IDE. 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 This is known as a suffix. So it becomes carbon dioxide. Okay, carbon dioxygen sounds weird. So chemists use the convention of ide, the suffix ide, so it's carbon dioxide. So 5 steps. I encourage you to do this in an exam because it's just nice to sort of space out what's happening and to show the steps so you don't get lost. Okay, there's a lot of students out there that can do it in 1 step. Brilliant. But I wouldn't recommend it, especially under exam conditions. Just do it step by step. Okay, so 5 steps. Let's do another one. It's really just doing examples from here. Let's do another one. Let's do this, S2Cl2. Step 1, write down the name of the first non-metal element that appears on the left, which is S, and that's sulfur. Step 2, write down the prefix that goes with sulfur, in this case 2, which is di, so disulfur. Step 3, write down the name of the second non-metal element, which is chlorine in this case, so the disulfur stays. Chlorine. Step 4, write down the prefix that goes with the chlorine, which is 2, so it's di, so it's disulfur dichlorine. As I mentioned, chemists like to have specific names. The chlorine, replace it with chloride, disulfur dichloride. Okay, always remember the ide. For covalent compounds, even ionic compounds, as we'll see later, but it's ide. Okay, so disulfur dichloride. Let's do another one. Let's do H2 HBr. Step 1, for the name of the first non-metal element, which is hydrogen. Step 2, there's no number to go with the hydrogen, no subscript here, so we'll leave it as it is, hydrogen. Step 3, the name of the second non-metal element, which is bromine. So hydrogen, bromine. Step 4, the prefix that goes with bromine. Now, even if there's no number, no subscript here, it's still 1. You still have to write it by convention, okay? So it becomes hydrogen monobromine. And step 5, the final step, replace the bromine with bromide. So you get hydrogen monobromide. And just some tips. So for other non-metal elements, like fluorine, suppose the covalent compound ends with fluorine, that becomes fluoride. Chlorine becomes chloride. See, there's a pattern here. Bromine, as we saw, becomes bromide. Iodine becomes iodide. Nitrogen, something ends with nitrogen, it becomes nitride. If something ends with hydrogen, it becomes hydride. If something ends with phosphorus, it becomes phosphide. It's good to know these. And carbon becomes carbide. Okay, that's the pattern. Okay, rule of thumb, IDE at the end. So that's how you name covalent compounds. It's very straightforward. It's a series of 5 steps. You start from the left element, work your way to the right element, and just make sure to understand the prefixes as well.